best advice?
Be kind to yourself and be kind to others. What do I mean by that? It sounds trite. You need to be able to ask, how do you know? So when somebody comes to you to ask for you the service, give me a course on this or put Johnny on a sales course, how do you know that that's the right thing to do? But you need to be kind to yourself. Sometimes that might feel too difficult a question, and sometimes we just have to go, okay, I'll put Johnny on a course.
Welcome to the Rogue L&D Hot Shots podcast, a short podcast allowing you to meet some of the brilliant folk driving people performance and development forward in an informal and human way. My name's Tom Bailey, award-winning L&D leader and passionate maverick for all things development. Join me as I ask just 10 questions of some of the industry's most innovative and interesting people. Tell us about yourself.
I'm Michelle Parry-Slater. I'm the author of the Learning and Development Handbook. I should show you a copy. There we go. Learning and Development Handbook. The new yellow edition came out, second edition came out in September. My career has been, like many, a squiggly career. Started teaching English in Japan and ended up in learning and development as a result of that. And I've been running my own business, Kairos Modern Learning, for the last decade. Recently relocated to Australia and working in Australia now as well as in the UK, which is joyful and loving the sunshine. But what I really am keen and passionate about is that we start early enough in learning and development and organisation development work that I do. And what do I mean by start early enough? Well, we can tend to get brought in when the solution's already decided. And I really push back and ensure that we've got a good, strong evidence base for what we do. And we don't simply just slot in and serve, but we actually consult.
What are you passionate about?
I'm passionate about we don't start soon enough. We don't get involved soon enough. The problem that we have is that people come to us with our solutions, their solutions. And when they come to us, they're expecting us to serve and deliver. And that's the wrong place to start. We need to start sooner in the journey. And for me, that starts with relationships. So even before there's a problem to be solved, building good relationships, understanding your business, understanding the language of your business, talking that language, not talking the language of learning and development. That way, when people do have a problem, they go, oh yeah, I know, let's go and chat to Michelle, she'll help. And that's kind of the point, that then we can start sooner in the journey. If, for example, there's new product developments, they're creating something brand new and you're in those early conversations, when it comes to then, can you teach people how to sell or use this product or make this product? You've already got that backstory and then you can weave that into the learning experience. And that's why I'm really, really keen that we stop serving and we start asking, how do you know that that's the right thing to do? Asking it kindly, not just, why? That's just aggressive and unkind, but asking it kindly. How do we know that this is the right solution? How do we know this is the right thing to do? And we've got good relationships, so we can have those robust consultative conversations.
What's the best L&D you've seen?
So this is a really interesting one. What comes to mind for me is a project that I was brought in to help because the leadership program wasn't landing. So I went into the organisation and I looked at the program they had, which was excellent. So if you were to write down what would make good learning and development, it was well curated, it was totally blended, it was the same material offered in different resources, it was at the pace of the organisation. There were so many elements to it that were great, and yet it didn't land at all. People were not engaging, people were cancelling engagement at the last minute, people were deprioritizing learning. And they said, come and help us to make this work, because we've got a really strong business case why we need better leadership. Their staff survey for consecutive years had been poor leadership and people were leaving. They had a massive attrition problem. So as I say, on paper, all the answers were there to a problem that was very clearly defined, but in reality, nothing was working. And so when I went and I just noticed how people were with each other. And interestingly, it came down to another of the chapters in my book, environment, permission, and culture. So they had the right environment, as in they had options. People were coming together physically, people were working online. So they had all of the environment stuff allegedly sorted out. They had permission that this was a senior sponsored program by the chief exec themselves. This is why it's so important. We need to give you the time. You must invest your time into this. However, no culture for learning whatsoever. There was no respect for learning. The leaders themselves were not, the senior sponsors were saying do it, but they were not learning themselves. They were not talking about learning. That there was just no appetite for it. And so all of the sort of KPIs in the organization were not for developing yourself or getting better or developing your teams. They were all about output for product. And so it's so interesting to me why doesn't something work? What's missing? You've got to have all the elements. And this goes back to, you've got to start early enough. If you've created, as they had created, a really fantastic leadership program, on paper, potentially award winning if they could have landed it and got some stats behind it. But it didn't land at all because they hadn't addressed the foundation. They were basically building their house on sand, not rocks.
Favorite hand gesture?
Thumbs up. Do you know why I love thumbs up? Because so much technology now, when you do that in a meeting, it picks it up. The AI picks it up and gives you a little symbol for it. And I just think that's a really lovely thing. So I love a thumbs up.
One thing you didn't learn?
So the one thing that I haven't learned in life is constantly, I'll say yes when I should say no. Now, actually, you get into a lot of good stuff when you're just a yes person. Yeah, sure, let's do that. I'm now living in another country because I was like, sure, yeah, let's do that, which is pretty dramatic for no real benefit or reason other than the weather's amazing and it's a really nice experience. However, it has harmed my business because I've been too trusting, and so I should have said no. There was one particular client who didn't pay me, and I was really bought into the project, and I just kept saying, sure, I'll keep coming back, I'll keep working on the project. And then after 6 months, I really was feeling it because I had 7 associates for me working on that project who I paid in full. Of course, because, that's me and I pay on receipt of invoice. So I should have said no sooner. And that's just one example of when I should have said no sooner. But yeah, I have not learned that life lesson. And part of me doesn't want to learn that life lesson. Part of me wants to maintain the innate good in people. And so I don't want to really learn that life lesson, but it teaches you in other ways, doesn't it? It teaches you the resilience. It teaches you the resourcefulness because, how on earth am I going to pay 7 associates when I haven't been paid for 6 months? So there's all of that going on, but that's definitely something that I haven't learned, even though my conscious and unconscious brain are shouting at me.
Proudest moment?
Randomly, not really an L&D moment. When George Floyd was murdered in the US, I was working with the CIPD at the time, and they've been my client for a very long time, and I love working with them. And the request to support people of colour in the CIPD at that time was made by Peter Cheese, and the request was, what do you need, what do you want, what can happen here to support, because we need to address the ripples that had, and I feel like it affected the UK, certainly the US, perhaps more than I noticed it's affected in Australia. But at the time, I was super proud and absolutely bricking it to be asked to host and facilitate the conversation. And that conversation was an invite to everyone in the CIPD to join in a Teams call where anybody who was affected could speak, predominantly our colleagues who were people of colour, and they chose me to facilitate that. I'm not 1,000% sure of why they did that, why they chose me over anyone else, but I am super proud that they felt that I would hold that space, that I would be respectful, and that as an ally, I wanted that to be a positive experience and to move something, to create an action out of the end of that conversation. And that genuinely is my proudest moment, but as I say, probably my most nerve-wracking moment as well, because I didn't want to get that wrong. It felt really important to me. Just for some context, and not that anyone knew that at the time I was asked, but I studied African American women at university, and I specialised in African American women in film and representation. And so that was hugely why that was so proud for me, that, obviously my actions as an ally were seen and heard and noticed in a way that I hadn't consciously been aware.
Worst experience in L&D?
So the very first time, I'd done a lot of public speaking with Hearing Dogs for Deaf People. I got involved with the charity years and years ago. And if you ever want to be a public speaker, I really recommend volunteering as a speaker for a charity, because they need you and they need you to advertise and advocate for them. But it's a fantastic proving ground. You learn all the bad stuff, you do it all wrong, and nobody's got any expectations of you when you're a speaker for a charity. You're just rocking up at the local Rotary or Scout or Guide group and talking. So I'd done all of that experience, but I hadn't had a lot of experience speaking publicly in businesses. And the very first time that happened was at the Global Sales Conference, which I'd organised with my director for a global company that I was working in as head of L&D. And I walk on stage, and a sea of grey suits, because there were 99.9% men. And I look at my microphone, which is sort of on my chest here, and I wasn't sure, is it working? Is it not working? So I tap it and I say, am I turned on? Oh man, it's so the wrong thing to say.
Best celebrity moment?
So I could tell you about the time I met my all-time hero of all time, Robin Williams, but I'm not going to tell you about Robin Williams because it makes me cry, because he was taken from this world too soon. But I am going to tell you about the time I met Don Taylor in real life for the first time. So for those that aren't familiar, Donald Taylor is the doyen of learning technologies in the UK. And he will cringe if ever he hears this, because he's such a lovely, lovely human being. And I'm lucky to have been mentored by him since then. But when I first ever came across Don was at the Learning and Skills Group webinars, which still run today, and they were just a wonderful way to meet community. And I would sort of, always carve time out on a Thursday to go to them. And he was so good live online. And this was well over a decade ago, before we were all good live online, but he just had a way about him. And I really wanted to kind of, not necessarily emulate him, but learn from him. And I was then invited to go to Learning Technologies and speak at Learning Technologies a few years after that. And I saw him kind of across a crowded room. I just was starstruck and embarrassed. I was like, it's Don Taylor. What do you say? What if he comes near me? What do I say? So I avoided him for the entire day. And then I was standing in the coat line to get my jacket, so I couldn't not be in that line. And he came over to speak to somebody else. And he was standing literally 2 feet away from me. I was like, eyes forward, don't look at him, eyes forward, don't look at him. And I just carried on kind of like, just don't look at Don. Don Taylor's right there. Anyhow, years later, I told him this story, and my goodness, he laughed so hard. And it was when somebody had introduced me to him and said, "Oh, do you know Don?" I was like, "No, I don't know Don. I'm looking at my shoes." But he's just such a lovely human being, really nice. But that did feel like meeting a major celebrity, and now I like call him a friend. So it's just bizarre. But again, that taught me something. See, we're always learning. Our conscious mind is always working, because what it taught me is, if people ever think of me like that, I would be horrified. And I'm not saying I'm in any way a celebrity, but once you've written a book or once you've been on a few podcasts or something, there is a distance, and there shouldn't ever be. We're still humans. We still use the bathroom. We still have breakfast, And so I don't ever want that to ever happen. So I want to always make sure that I'm available to anyone who wants to have a conversation.
Something you believed but nobody else did.
So my Emperor's New Clothes is evidence-based practice. And this came from my own imposter syndrome, because I never had a kind of a formal route into L&D. Who the hell does? That was rude. Some people do, obviously. But a lot of people don't sit at school and go, Miss, when I grow up, I want to be in learning and development, because they've never heard of it. So because I taught English in Japan, when I came back and I started working in global mobility, and when new people joined the business, they went, oh, go sit with Michelle, she'll teach you what to do. She used to be a teacher. And I'm like, I wasn't. I taught English in Japan. But anyway, and that's kind of how it all started, that I got involved in learning and development. And I really enjoyed that part of my job. And then eventually it became formalized, and I went and did a train the trainer course, because that's how old I am and that's all that was on offer at the time. So I did my train the trainer, and now I'm a trainer. I'm like, I'm just the same person I was like 10 minutes ago. And so I always wanted to prove that what I was doing was the right thing. And I also worked in an intensely male-dominated environment. I explained earlier about how embarrassing that was. And so I always felt I'm very short, I'm only 5'3", short, blonde woman in a male, tall, big space, that I needed to be able to say, right, these are the reasons we're doing what we're doing. And that was how my practice was built up. And then when I kind of went out into the real world and started consulting, and people were just like, just do it. Like, I want you to come and just implement this learning management system, or I want you to just, and I'm like, don't say just, like, tell me the reasons why these are the right things to do. And people just don't care. And corporates would spend literally tens of thousands of pounds on an LMS, which you could see would not solve the problem, because they'd not dug into the problem deep enough. And to be honest, I've walked away from a few of those gigs because I don't want my name associated with something that goes wrong when you can see it's going to go wrong. I mean, the best one of these, I was brought in to a retailer to help them to implement a really interesting, it's not just an LMS, like a learning experience platform. And I said, this is interesting, retailer, you've bought this SaaS platform. Talk to me about how your retail employees are going to access it. Are you going to give them tablets or something? And they said, no, we've got it all sorted. We're going to use our tills. So in the quiet times between customers, they can go on to do learning. And we've bought bite size. And I thought, okay, it's an interesting approach. So I said, okay, how's it going to look on the till? And we went over to the till, the DOS-based till that they were going to run a Windows-based SaaS program on. I'm like, dude, like, who sold you this? Why have you even bought this? Where is your procurement? Do you know what I mean? I'm like, nah, I'm backing out of that. I can't help you here.
Best advice.
Be kind to yourself and be kind to others. What do I mean by that? It sounds trite. You need to be able to ask, how do you know? So when somebody comes to you to ask for you the service, give me a course on this, or put Johnny on a sales course, how do you know that that's the right thing to do? But you need to be kind to yourself. Sometimes that might feel too difficult a question. And sometimes we just have to go, okay, I'll put Johnny on a course. And if that's the kind thing to do for you, then fine. But if you can hold yourself to account, we will as a profession become better. I don't ever want to be that person that tells somebody else how they should do their job. You will not find the word should in this book. It appears actually twice, but the context is fine. I'm not telling anyone what to do, because you have to go at the pace that you can mentally cope with. You can have to go at the pace that you can, your business can cope with, and pick your battles. Of course, we all want to be using fantastic learning programs and digital and social learning is rocking, and we've got a great learning culture. But the reality of the world we live in is hierarchy and barriers and not enough money, and the dog was just sick on the carpet or whatever, so you've got to deal with life as it's thrown at you. So be kind, but be kind to others by asking them to just improve their game a little bit, but go at the pace.
Thank you to our guest and to you for listening. If you want to boost the impact of your organisation's people development practices, I'd love to connect. You can find me at thomasbailey.co. Alternatively, you can look me up on LinkedIn.